Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. We're going to give it just a brief second to allow people to join from the virtual lobby. We'll get started in about 10 to 15 seconds. Again, thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll get started in just a couple of seconds here. We're just giving a breath for everyone to be able to join from the virtual lobby. All right, hello, and welcome to the webinar, the 2025 Guide on What's Next for SAP Automation, sponsored by Precisely. I'm Sean Byers from ERP Today, and I have a couple of quick announcements before we begin. This session is being recorded, and a copy of today's recording will be emailed to you following the session. If you are joining us live, the webinar is designed to be interactive between you and the presenter. So we invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A text box at the bottom of your screen. After the presentation, we'll answer as many questions as time allows. Joining me today is Andrew Hayden, Principal Product Marketing Manager at Precisely. Over to you, Andrew.
All right, Sean. Well, thank you very much. It is great to be here, and I hope everyone is having a great day. So, yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about kind of what we see as trends for 2025. And this is based on a research survey that we did with ASUG, so the American SAP User Group. Last year, we have our 2026 survey is currently in market. And we're going to walk through kind of what we saw from that, and specifically what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about digital transformation and the relationship that it has with what's happening with SAP and around SAP today. I'm going to talk a little bit about complexity in SAP master data, because that really sets up a lot of the discussion that we're going to see around why automation is becoming more important and kind of what the survey said to us about what's happening in the SAP environment and in the SAP market space in general. Then we're going to actually dive into some of the results from the survey. So really, we're going to look at what did SAP users say? And there were about 200 SAP users that were surveyed for it. And what came back from them? What did they say in terms of what are the challenges they're seeing, what's happening in their world, and then some specific areas around S/4HANA and Fiori and some of the challenges they're seeing there. And then I'm going to close with a little bit of what we see as the path forward for SAP automation, kind of what's happening in organizations as they adopt automation, and I will wrap it up from there. So let's get started. All right, digital transformation is always an interesting topic to talk about, because if you think about it, we've been doing digital transformation forever, and that's not really going to change. If you think about and ask yourself, what is the end state of digital transformation? Well, there really isn't one. We go through various phases of digital transformation, whether it's around, originally, okay, we're changing the way we manage our data. We're digitizing everything. We're digitalizing everything. And right now, one of the big aspects, especially in the SAP world, as people modernize their SAP environments, is they're looking at automation as a way to really enhance what's happening in that world. And there are a number of things that are happening during that migration and modernization process, and it creates a lot of tension that we're seeing. One is kind of what's happening in your world today. What's happening to sustain your business? Because let's face it, we have to have an ongoing business as we're going through this modernization. So dealing with and solving those day-to-day challenges that we all have is really a big aspect of what's happening today as we move forward and look at what are our strategic initiatives. So how do we make sure we balance those two between each other? Currently today, in many cases, we are doing a lot of processes manually. We know this, we deal with customers every day who are going, how do I fix my manual processes? And this is where automation starts to come into it, because as automation has become more prevalent, as automation platforms like our Automate platform have become more capable, we're looking at business transformation and digital transformation with automation at the heart of it going forward. So that's one of those innovation and next steps. And then obviously, today we're looking at security and compliance risks, which are constant. I think we all feel the threat that comes from outside bad actors and things of that nature. And now as we look at the future, it's like, what happens to those when we go into an AI-driven future, AI-driven innovation? where our data has to be correct, it has to be governed, it has to have all those aspects around it that are going to enable us to trust the results we get out of an AI model, if you will. So this is kind of that tension that we have between what's happening today and where we want to go in the future, and how we're going to, sustain our business today and innovate as we move forward and as we modernize. And this is a great quote from a company called HFS. They are an analyst firm based in London, or they started in London. They also have a headquarters in New York now. And a few years ago, they said, technology is a means to an end, but data is the currency of digital transformation. While I agree with this, I think it's interesting to realize that I would argue data is only half of the argument, or is only half of that equation, because you have to look at this interdependence of process and data, especially in an SAP environment. SAP forces us and is very prescriptive in the way and the processes we use to create and manage data. And it's one of those areas where if you do just a process improvement initiative, and we saw a lot of this a number of years ago when RPA first came out, we're going to do a process improvement initiative, then we want to 3x the speed of this process. Well, if you don't take the data aspect of that into consideration, what you can do is, if you've got a process that creates bad data, you suddenly 3x that process, and you're creating a lot of bad data very, very quickly. Same thing happens on the data cleansing side. We have a lot of customers and companies that we know of that are constantly cleansing data, but they're not really addressing the needs or what's happening to create that data in terms of the processes. So a well-designed automation strategy as part of your digital transformation effort is going to look at both of these. It's going to look at that interdependence of process and data and really understand, what does that mean for our business today? And what does it mean for delivering trusted data in the future? Process automation and a well-designed process automation platform and solution really can look at that interdependence of process and data and deliver high quality, high integrity data that is trusted into your systems all at the beginning, or so you know what's happening along the way. So this is something to take into consideration. We talk about digital transformation. This ultimately is where you want to get. You want to get to that level where you have high integrity, highly trusted data that you can feed an AI model with, or you can feed your business and run your business off of with a great deal of confidence. Automation is a great way to get there. Now, in SAP, one of the things that often gets in the way, though, is the complexity of the processes, is the complexity of the data, and really around that master data that we need for SAP. So if we think about SAP master data, we often think of the big four, vendor, customer, materials, and finance. And I know in S/4HANA, we manage customer and vendor as business partner, but the reality of it is they're still slightly separate, and you treat them differently in the way your business runs them. So those in and of themselves are highly complex, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But what really adds complexity to this system is everything that is dependent on that master data being correct. It's your billing, it's your invoicing, it's bills of materials, it's routings, it's invoices. I think I just said that. So understanding that it is a dance between how do you manage these things, how do you deliver accuracy and consistency and integrity to the data that is master data and transactional data, and then how do you drive efficiencies into that as you modernize your system? Excuse me. And so materials is a really good example of that. Materials touches a lot of different things. So if you think about your material master, which has all of that core information about your materials, it's going to affect things around production planning, purchasing, procurement, inventory management, finance, accounting, controlling, sales and marketing. So you have to make sure that that material master is correct from day one. And if you're entering that data manually, you often end up with a high degree of error because these things are error prone. And we just know this from manual data processes are slow, error prone. They don't tend to give you the best results. Being able to automate a lot of that risk out of the process can be very important. Excuse me. And so what we're left dealing with, and this is what our survey over the last few years has shown us and continues to reinforce, is there is a the complexity is multidimensional. You have the complexity of the data itself. So let's take that material record, for example. There are on average, about 300 data elements in a material master record. And you create those over about, if you're in this SAP GUI, about 18 screens. That's a lot of data. And when you're entering it manually, that means that there are 300 opportunities for error. So the data itself is complex. The processes that we have to go through and the way SAP prescribes those processes, those in and of themselves are complex. Again, you're talking about in the SAP GUI, it's 18 screens. It's multiple tabs in a Fiori app. It's same thing in the web GUI. And often to create that material master record, you're talking about touching multiple parts of the organization. So now you have different parts of the organization with different cadences and different requirements and different priorities that all have a different need in the way that they want to address creating and managing that material record. So you have this organizational and overlapping complexities that continue to grow. And one of the things we've also seen as people migrate to S/4HANA and as they modernize their SAP systems is that they're going through a lot of change management as well. So if you've got a team that's been an ECC and a lot of customized ECC processes for a very long time, and now you're moving to, let's say, SAP public cloud, where you've standardized everything. Now you've got to change the way people have doing those processes, been doing those processes for a long time, and they're going to do them going forward. So you've got to go with a standard SAP process. Now it may simplify it, but let's face it, people don't like change. So now not only do you have the continued complexity around the data and continued complexity around the process, but you have an additional organizational complexity built around how do we go through that change management process. So this is where we see complexity continuing to be a challenge, no matter whether you're living with your legacy system or whether you're modernizing. Excuse me. So what did our survey results say as we looked through them and started looking at what is really happening in the marketplace? How does the SAP market look at primarily automation, but again, a few other things that we'll talk about in a minute. So automation usage is growing. We saw a 15% increase from 2023 to 2024. We're getting to the point where if we see another 15% increase, I will be shocked because we're getting to the point where only 25% not using it. So you run into diminishing returns. But this growth and adoption, I think, is being driven by a couple of different factors. One is just an awareness that there are automation solutions available for SAP. For a very long time, automating SAP was extremely difficult. It required a lot of special knowledge. It required a lot of professional development, a lot of expensive development. It required long time frames. But now there is an increasing awareness that there are a lot of capabilities in low-code, no-code platforms that can solve a lot of those challenges that people have around SAP automation and the complexities within those processes. And the other thing we're starting to see is more and more customers and companies that we talk to, they've run into the problem of they can no longer just throw bodies at a problem. You're no longer able to just call up a shared service center somewhere and say, hey, I need to speed up this process. Can we add 5 people? It doesn't speed up the process enough. So understanding the productivity gains you can get from automation have become a very critical part of what is driving automation success and automation growth and adoption. So I think it's very important to understand these things that are happening, and they're all happening concurrently as we go through and as we look at what's happening with modernization overall. And interestingly enough, as people start to adopt automation, we're seeing more and more lean towards this use case by use case adoption of automation. So pre-pandemic, go back, look at how people were adopting automation. And a lot of the automation organizations and initiatives were really looking at how do we create a unified, centralized automation strategy. Now, we're going to do everything with one platform. And Gartner said very clearly, God knows, probably in 2019, 2018, they said, do not assume a single automation platform will solve all of your needs. And that's absolutely true. And as companies have started to add automation into their IT environments, as they've started to add it into their businesses, as they've started looking at how does it drive efficiencies, they've come to realize that automation, while you may use a core set of tools, and we are seeing a consolidation to smaller portfolios of automation tools, but applying automation tends to be is almost exclusively at that use case by use case basis. You're not going to automate a financial reconciliation process with the same tools, and in the same way you're going to automate a material management process. It's just not the same. It's often requires different skill sets, different types of data, different ways that data is going to be used. So this case by case way of looking at automation, we think, is not only going to continue to grow, but it's going to be the norm. So you're going to look at a best of breed approach for this is the portfolio we have, but you're going to apply automation use case by use case. And what this also means is that you're probably going to be adopting citizen developers. We see citizen developers becoming more and more important. 58% of people in our last survey recognize that citizen development is important or very important for their organization going forward and for adopting automation. And I'll give you a good example of this. So we have a customer that's one of the largest companies in the world. And within their IT organization, they have a precisely automate team of about 20 to 25 people. And they literally live in the IT world. They use our platform to develop complex data intensive processes. These things that require a lot of complex workflow and a lot of contingent workflow and things of that nature. But if you think about automation, a lot of automation is not those processes. It's simpler processes. It's more straightforward processes. And for those, they have a network of over 100 citizen developers worldwide who are developing locally automation solutions that they can apply within their business and within their business unit that is supported by this group within IT. So if you think about how you can magnify the impact of automation across your organization, citizen developers can become massively important and drive huge benefits when you have the right tools in place. So again, they're using the Precisely Automate platform. I would encourage you to look at it to check us out if you are looking for an automation solution. But the importance of citizen developers can't be understated going forward, and the capabilities of the tools available to them, you can't underestimate what they can do for you and for your business. So very interesting what we found from the survey there. Now, we also asked about what are some of the challenges that they're seeing as you go forward and as you try and automate processes within your organization and within your SAP environment, especially. And the big one that kind of really popped up last year was integration. And when we talk about integration, it's being able to connect disparate systems to each other for an end-to-end automation process. So a good example of this that we often see is people looking at, I'm doing sales orders and I need to be able to connect Salesforce with SAP. Cool. Not the easiest thing to do in many cases, but there are ways to do it now. So as people modernize their SAP systems, they're going, wait, I have opportunities now because I can use REST APIs to connect web-based systems to web-based systems and have them talk to each other and manage a process all the way through. But it's still a very, very challenging thing to do. So SAP has their integration suite within BTP. So really, really good opportunity there. We have APIs that enable you to integrate our platform with other systems of record. And I think people are recognizing that this is an opportunity as they move forward. Now, we saw this in our survey. ASUG has seen the same thing in their research. If you are an SAP user, if you are a member of ASUG, I encourage you to check out what is happening within or what is available from SAP or ASUG for their research. Marissa Gilbert and her team do a fantastic job there. So really good data there. Obviously, read our survey and read our report, which I'll give you a link to at the end. But really good information, I think, to understand. And this was one of those areas that kind of just shot to the top. In 2023, it just sat in the middle of everything else. But 2024, it really came into prominence across the SAP landscape and in SAP organizations. Complexity of the business process continued to be a very high high level challenge for a lot of people. And we understand that. Again, we've talked about complexity. I mentioned it earlier. The fact that SAP processes tend to be so complex and they tend to involve so many different aspects. And there's so much data and the processes themselves, and the fact you've got organizational challenges. So that is not surprising at all to us. We did find it interesting that there was a drop in the need for the understanding and defining the process requirements. In some ways, this is not surprising because I think people are understanding their processes a little bit more. They're understanding as they modernize, they're going through and doing a lot of process analysis. You have a lot of process mining tools that are able to identify that process more and more and help you really get a handle on what are the challenges we have to automate this process. The other one is as you're going from a customized process to a standard SAP process. Again, if you're moving to public cloud, or if you're just adopting standard processes in an SAP private S/4HANA private cloud, it's really important to recognize that these business processes continue to be complex, but it is easier to understand what's happening within them. Now, the other one that's flagged here is this drop in the challenge around data quality. I'll talk about this in a little while, but I think it's one of those areas that may be under-recognized. I was on a panel with a number of business leaders last fall, and we were talking about that migration to S/4HANA. And one of them made the comment, he said that they'd moved from ECC to S/4HANA, and they had basically just picked up their data and gone from ECC to S/4HANA without doing any data cleansing. And they figured they would do it in S/4HANA. And he said that was a mistake. So I highly recommend if you're doing and going through this process, keep this in consideration. It is a bigger challenge than I think a lot of people think it is. So data quality is a big one, which our survey did not show. We're doing a lot more around data quality in this year's survey. So hopefully we'll get some different and better data. So that's some of the basics that we found just around automation adoption, and the challenges that we see. What did we really learn from it? Well, automation is growing. More people are recognizing that automation has value. There are more tools, more opportunities to automate your processes as you go forward. Again, I would encourage you to look at the Precisely Automate platform. For those of you out there who've been in SAP for a long time, you probably know about WindShuttle. If you know about WindShuttle, we are WindShuttle. So although we are much more improved than what WindShuttle was. So WindShuttle was acquired 5 years ago. And the Precisely Automate platform, if you're familiar with WindShuttle, you will recognize it and go, oh, this is the same thing I always knew and loved. So a lot of growth in what is capable and what is available for people to automate their SAP processes. We do see this use case focus becoming more prevalent, people getting away from we're going to automate everything with one tool. Now let's look at our individual use cases. Where are the complex ones, where are the simple ones, and what tool is going to be appropriate for each one. And then the other thing we see is this persistence and complexity. Because even though you may be modernizing the infrastructure of your ERP system, you may be going from an on-prem to a cloud-based, you may be going to a hosted, you may even be going to SAP private cloud or public cloud. The complexity persists. A material record did not get any simpler or have any fewer data elements because you've moved from one system to the other. The number of steps in that process did not get reduced. The number of people in your organization that are touched by that process did not go down. So there is a persistence of complexity that I think often we see companies not realizing this is going to be the case. So just be aware of that as you're going through your modernization efforts and understand where this can become a challenge and what are the opportunities out there to address it as you're going through your modernization and migration process. All right, so let's dig a little bit deeper into the data and look at, we talked about S/4HANA adoption. We're trying to understand because there's a lot of conflicting information depending on whether you're looking at analyst data, whether you're looking at our data, whether you're looking at SAP data, whether you're looking at ASUG data. Ours is fairly consistent with the ASUG data. And also around Fiori and Fiori adoption, because obviously as people are moving from ECC to S/4HANA, SAP is encouraging more people to adopt Fiori and the web GUI over the web GUI. And we really want to get a handle on kind of what's happening as people move to S4HANA in terms of their user interface. First big one we saw on S4HANA migration, now it's really in full swing. For a long time, it felt like it was a laggard, but companies are now starting to make that move, and they've gone through their planning process and they're dipping their toe in the water. 22% being only fully migrated, that makes sense to us. The 21% that are partially migrated, the 7% that are sort of starting that move, I think this number is going to grow. This combination is going to grow, especially that partially migrated. And I've talked to enough people who are in the middle of that process to get a better sense of why that's the case. So I'll give you an example. I talked to a company, IT director from a major manufacturer just a couple of months ago. And he was saying they had 8 ECC systems that they were consolidating into a single S4HANA instance. Cool. Two of those ECC systems were original to the company. They had been at 2 different plants, and they had already migrated those. The other 6 systems that they had acquired through acquisitions, through an M&A effort over about a 20-year period. Those systems were the challenge. And those systems, he acknowledged, were going to take a much longer time to migrate because they had, different data structures. They had addressed the data differently. They, in some cases, had specific customized processes that they had adopted. So I think, and his feeling was, this is going to take a much longer time because they have to reconcile those systems with the new ECC or S4HANA instance. So if you're going through this process and I think looking at it for what are the core systems we can move quickly, but realizing there are these other challenges you're going to have. If you've got a lot of different ECC systems, they've come from different places, they've been acquired over time, it may take you a little bit longer than just being able to move it all at once. So I don't think that's unusual, but I do think actually as more people get into this migration and modernization process, we're going to see that number grow. The other thing we saw is 30%, an additional 30%. So for a total of 80% plan in the next 2 years. So by the end of 2026 to be in that migration process. So significant number of SAP customers now are taking that leap, from ECC to S4HANA. 17% said more than 2 years. I talked to a defense contractor recently who said they're not going to start their migration until sometime after 2030. So very interesting looking at different approaches and the way people are going through it. So this data for us made a lot of sense. But it's really interesting and good to know kind of what that cadence and what those processes are and how people are moving through it. The big aha moment again was talking to that company I just mentioned, plus a few others that are like, some systems we moved very quickly and very easily. Others are taking a much longer time because there are so many different considerations we have to look at. So something to think about is if you're going through this process is what is your total time frame going to be? And then we talked about Fiori. So what's happening as people move to Fiori? And there's a lot of emphasis on Fiori. There's a lot of things happening within the Fiori world. I know there aren't nearly as many Fiori apps as there are T-codes in the SAP GUI. So some things are, when you move to S4HANA, are still available. If you adopt the SAP GUI, obviously they're all available. Others are only available as Fiori apps. And there are a limited number of Fiori apps. Last I saw, there's only a few thousand Fiori apps versus the 20 some odd thousand T codes that were available. And then the web GUI, I think there's almost as many as there were available as there were original T codes. But as people are making this move, what they're running into is they now have these mixed user interface environments. Again, think about the company I talked about. They have 8, they've moved 2. They've adopted Fiori in their new S4HANA instance. They still have SAP GUI in those other 6. They have a few Fiori apps that are available in some of those ECC ones, but they're old Fiori apps. So you have this mixed environment for a lot of them, where you've got SAP GUI, you've got Fiori, and you've got GUI for HTML. And excuse me. This is creating a lot of challenges for people because there are automation solutions available in one, but not necessarily in all. And this is one of those areas, again, that we have tried to address with our Automate Studio product that allows you to automate all three from the same platform. So your users work in the exact same way. So they don't need to know whether whether the original was SAP GUI, whether it was GUI for HTML, or whether it was a Fiori app. And this has been of great interest to a lot of companies as they're moving through, because it simplifies not only their development environment, it simplifies their user environment, where the user does what they've always done. It just means that the system it's going to is a different system. So very important for them to be able to do that and understand the complexity that this creates, because Fiori in and of itself creates a number of complexities. And I think some people, as they're looking at Fiori, they kind of overlook a few things. And this goes back to this whole issue of complexity that doesn't, persistence of complexity. If you're entering data in Fiori manually, same number of data elements, doesn't change. The number of steps you have to go through doesn't change. It can be very slow. The processes are complex. And again, welcome to the world of error-prone fingers. So I think as you make your modernization move, just keep into consideration what's happening when you look at Fiori as being the be-all, end-all. It's not necessarily that. Certain SAP processes are only available as Fiori apps, so commodity codes. And we heard a number of people come to us and go, help, we don't like managing commodity codes in Fiori. Is there a better way? And so with our automation solution, they've been able to do that. And then the other one that they run into is that the Fiori Launchpad or the Launchpad within S4HANA sometimes can mask what's behind that tile. It might be a Fiori app. It might open SAP GUI, or it might open GUI for HTML. And being able to deliver a consistent user interface through automation for the business users can be extremely beneficial and can drive a lot of efficiencies through your organization. So we've just found that talking to companies and talking to customers over the years, Fiori, while it's very, very good and very clean and works great for a number of processes, sometimes it's not really the best answer. And we think there are others that are better. So what are some of the things conclusions we've drawn around S4HANA? Well, one, adoption of S4HANA is accelerating. We're seeing that more and more, as you saw, 80% in the next few years. Mixed interface environments create a lot of challenges for you in terms of not only from a development standpoint, but from a user standpoint. What are they going to be using? And then again, this persistence of complexity. Just because you've modernized your infrastructure, moving from ECC to S4HANA does not necessarily mean that the processes, the data, or the way that you create and manage it are going to be any simpler. So we continue to see this over and over again as we talk to more and more companies. So that's really what we learned from the research survey. That's just a subset of what we learned. If we look at the path forward for automation, what has this told us? Well, one of the big things it's told us is there is kind of this automation maturity pyramid that you work your way up, and we're seeing companies work their way up. Most companies, when they start an automation initiative, are really looking at one of those bottom two. And usually it starts with, how do I just eliminate my manual data entry? It's slow and it's error prone. I need to get rid of that. I need higher quality data. And the other one is, once they get rid of those manual data processes, they realize that you're going a lot faster. So the process can move a lot faster through automation. It eliminates the things that are inconsistent. Humans are inconsistent. And what that often means then is you get to step 3 and realize, oh, there's better business outcomes. I can report faster. I can change faster. I can move faster. And that gives me business agility. So automation really drives a lot of opportunities the more broadly it is adopted, and especially if you really take into consideration what we talked about earlier, that interdependence of process and data can be very, very important as you work your way through. And then finally, it's automation means organizational optimization. Yeah, one of the interesting things that we see, and it kind of flips the whole equation on its head. Once you get to that point where you realize, here's what automation can do for me, from it's eliminated manual data entry, it's made things faster. I'm getting better business results. Say that 3 times fast. And now I've got business agility. Now I look at my organization and go, I can optimize how I run my business, what my organization looks like. And it doesn't necessarily mean fewer employees. What it often means is I can use my employees and utilize them and have them be much more productive in ways that I hadn't expected, because I've taken away, I no longer have accountants who are spending half their time as data entry clerks doing invoicing. I no longer have people on the production floor having to manage materials and changes within materials manually because of the way that I was looking at it before. Now all of these things are automated, and you've got, if you're using something like our Automate Evolve, you can use business-friendly forms. So it's just those forms those people need at the various times, and it can significantly improve the time that it takes to, or reduce the time it takes to do something. We've got a customer who got the time that it takes to create one of their customers, and they've got over 1 million of them. It cut their customer create time from 144 hours to 6, just by adopting a form and workflow solution. So that's the kind of power that automation delivers to you. So overall, what have we learned from this survey and just from spending time in the market? Well, one is automation's accelerating. There are more and more people are adopting it as they modernize their systems because they're recognizing the value that it has. And modernization gives you a great opportunity to look at automation and figure out, how do I adopt this for my organization and drive those efficiencies through it. And it also means that there are opportunities for integration that I didn't have before. How do I make sure that over time I have a much more robust and efficient organization where it's not just SAP that I'm looking at, but I'm looking at all of the data across all of my systems and the processes that involve multiple systems? And how do I drive efficiencies across all of that? How do I make sure that sales orders that are involving Salesforce and SAP are seamless? How do I make sure that all of my master data across all of my systems is federated and consistent and accurate? So this is what we're seeing, and this is what the survey continues to back up for us. And so hopefully this has been helpful, and hopefully you have a much better sense of kind of what the data is showing. And if you're going through this and on your own, hopefully it reinforces a lot of what you've seen. If you want a copy of the report, you can either scan the QR code that's here on the screen, or you can go to precisely.com, and in the resource section, just look up under SAP automation. I believe it's under white papers. You can find it there, and a lot more information. Like I said, I really just touched on a couple of the core things that we have here. And again, I encourage you, if you're looking for more information about how Precisely can help you overall, go to precisely.com. There's lots of white papers, demos, other things that are available there. If you see something you like, schedule a call. We'd be happy to talk to you about how we can help your challenges beyond, not just SAP, but beyond SAP. Precisely is the data integrity company. We are focused on that. So you can really end up with or gain the highest quality, highest integrity data possible. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm going to turn it back over to Sean and see if we have any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. To our audience, just as a quick reminder, we encourage you all to submit any questions that you have by typing the questions into the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. A couple of questions that came in here. The first one, did you cover AI in any of the survey's questions, and what did you learn?
We learned AI changes very fast. Yeah, so a couple of years ago when we started doing the survey, we did have AI questions in there, and we realized that literally by the time we got the survey results back, analyzed them, and wrote the report, that the information was out of date. So we do not include it now. We just continue to do research overall because there is a lot of, since we do this survey annually, again, it changes. I mean, think about it. A year ago, everybody was talking about Gen AI. Now it's agentic AI, and I read something recently. But I think just understanding AI is a big part of automation, and it's going to be a big part of automation going forward. SAP has it with Joule, and a number of other companies have it with their automation systems. We are looking at it. The big challenge, I think, runs in two phases. One, so far what we see from AI is it does very simple things. We specialize in those complex data intensive processes, which are not, your prompt is going to take you longer to write than it's going to take to actually create the automation solution. But what we see from most of the solutions, the AI-driven solutions that are available now, is they tend to be really good at doing one thing. You can using your voice, you can tell it, I've received this email invoice, please turn it into an invoice in SAP. One thing at a time. Works great. But when you do have those more complex things like creating a master data record that has to go through that very specific process and touches a lot of different people and it's human in the loop, it doesn't work very well. So that's one of the things we see with AI. The other one that we've talked to companies about and they've expressed concern about is because AI is changing so fast, if they adopt an AI platform or solution environment now, is it going to be obsolete in 6 months? Are they going to make a lot of investment and suddenly discover that something else has surpassed it and there's a different way of doing it? So AI is in a really interesting place right now. It is evolving so quickly. So no, we did not include it in the survey. And that's the primary reason. It's just changing too fast when we do an annual survey for the answers to be relevant, we feel.
No, that makes perfect sense, actually.
Yeah,
it does.
It's scary how fast it's changing.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I mean, you hear about it everywhere, of course. It's in the news, it's in everything that we're doing now. But that, again, it's something that you report on, just as you said today, will change in a week or two, so it's not going to be relevant. Yeah. So that's great. Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question here. Are there specific trends that you are seeing that are not covered in the survey that you would like to talk about?
So I think there are a couple. And like I said, I didn't cover all of the survey. So there's a part of the survey and it's in the report about BTP. Just for the sake of time, I didn't have a chance to cover that. In terms of business technology platform, the adoption of BTP, and this actually falls in fairly closely with what we saw in the results for integration. The number one use for BTP is integration. And then I think the second is analytics. So we are seeing the growth and adoption of BTP as more people do make that move to S/4HANA and recognize the value of what is available in that as a service delivery platform. From an automation standpoint, one thing we have seen, and this is not reflected in the report, is as people start to look at BTP as a way to facilitate building automation solutions, they're recognizing that often it's kind of like a bunch of Lego blocks. And you still have to do the development work to assemble those Lego blocks. So we have a lot of conversations with companies that are enthusiastic about service delivery platforms, and then they realize that sometimes it's better to have a more complete platform that delivers everything in one place. Again, I'll go back to our platform. There's a couple of others that do it too. But that adoption of BTP has grown significantly, and I think we're going to continue to see that. It does have a lot of services, and especially the integration platform, that are really good. The other one, and I started to talk about it, is this whole issue around data quality. Like I said, it was interesting in the survey that we did in 2024 that it kind of dropped a bit. But the conversations we're having with customers more and more now, especially as they get into that migration process, is that they are seeing the need for data cleansing and to improve their data quality, not just as part of that migration process, but then how do they maintain that data quality going forward once they have migrated fully to an S/4HANA system. Then this goes back to this whole challenge around complexity. There are a lot of processes that probably are never going to be automated because they're so simple, or they are going to be automated, but like that example I gave on the AI where you've got an email invoice. Well, if somebody typed in a wrong digit in the AI invoice, you're still going to have that problem, or something's a little bit out of format. So delivering consistent data quality and being able to do data quality checks and data transformation to rationalize your data and do all those things as you move forward, I think that's going to be a critical aspect of what people see in that modernization effort. So that's the only trend that I think we see that the survey results really didn't deliver for us. and I know we're running short on time, so I'll just wrap this up with that. I think, you know, there are trends that we're seeing. Those two being the big ones, BTP and the report. Data quality doesn't necessarily align with what we're seeing from the survey results, just the conversations we're having. So hopefully that answers your question. And if you've got any more, please just drop it in. And like I said, I know we're running short on time, but we will be happy at Precisely to address any additional questions you have about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. That is all the time that we do have. Just as you mentioned, if we didn't get to any of your questions today, someone from the team will get back to you as quickly as possible to answer those questions. So again, thank you for your time. Just as a final reminder to the audience, this webinar will be available on ERP today as a webinar on demand, and all registrants will receive a link via email. A special thank you today to Andrew for joining us. And on behalf of ERP Today and Precisely, thank you to our audience for your time, and we hope that you have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.